Welcome to the Alain Elkann interviews, an unprecedented window into the minds of some of the most well-known and respected figures of the last 25 years.
Today we are in Arles, in south of France, in the LUMA Foundation, this huge building recently built by Frank Gehry. And in one of the buildings where there are the shows, there is a very important show because it is, if I am not wrong, your first retrospective in Europe.
With the Serpentine show.
One is Revelations at the Serpentine, and this one is Herstory in LUMA. Obviously, there is a critic and the director of the Serpentine, who is Hans-Ulrich Obrist, who has a lot to say about this. If I am not wrong about what I read, there are two people who really endorsed your work with passion. One is Hans Ulrich, who then did the show Revelations in London. Another one is Jeffrey Deitch, who has supported you since a long time.
We met Jeffrey in 2010. But he didn't start representing me until later because there was a period where he wasn't representing artists, but he became my advisor and guide in terms as my career changed so dramatically from being entirely excluded and marginalized to slowly having my work looked at beyond the dinner party.
And probably you were also marginalized because of what you fighted for, right?
Absolutely.
During your life, which is feminist art. No?
Right.
I mean, not everybody understands what feminist art is, right?
I know.
So if you could just briefly explain to our listeners or readers what is exactly feminist art.
Well, my definition has changed over the decades.
6 decades of work.
Yeah. It wasn't until the end of the 1960s that I set out to figure out how to create a feminist art practice, very deliberately. At that point, there was no such category. And in fact, the biggest compliment you could get in Los Angeles when I was young was that your work looked like it was painted by a man. So if your work looked in any way in the United States like it was made by a woman, that immediately disqualified it from being taken seriously as art. And that applied to the material, for example, fiber, textile, needlework, not art. But content, particularly content. So for the first decade of my career, I really tried to fit in. I tried to be a guy, but my real self kept sneaking through. And at the end of that decade, I decided that since, even though art has no gender, artists do. So as soon as I would walk out of my studio, I would be reminded by the world's reaction that I was a woman. And so I decided to confront that in my work. At that point, my idea of feminist art, although I never intended it to only be for a female audience, after all, I grew up looking at the Impressionists. I learned from male art what it means to be an artist. So I thought, well, why shouldn't men learn from women's art? Okay. But at that point, I was very focused on issues of gender. As I have evolved as an artist, my definition of feminism and my definition of feminist art have changed from gender to values. Feminist values, which go back actually to a writer named Christine de Pizan. The Book of the City of Ladies is really the first feminist literature. It kicked off a European-wide discourse on the role of women. But feminism now and feminist art now, in my view, deals with formulating a different set of values for the world, not based on competition, not based on patriarchy, but based on a different set of egalitarian and just values. So for me today, feminist art has to
It's a very
convey
interesting
that.
what you say, because in the Arles, at the LUMA exhibition, at the end of the exhibition, I think, there is a big panel where you write, "What if a woman ruled the world?" Right? I think you did that
yes.
When you did your work for Dior,
right.
for Curie.
The first project with
you
Dior.
did this pavilion, no, in Paris.
Yeah.
That's a bit what you think, no? I mean, in your art, you say, I depict a woman that is not depicted by a man, but by a woman.
But that's not all feminist art is. The problem with what you saw, the Dior banner, is you didn't see all of them.
No, there's only one that I saw.
Actually, there were 21 banners.
In Paris.
Yes, half in English, half in French, and the French ones are on their way here. I'm not interested in matriarchy, not. I am interested in equality. And the other banners raise a series of questions. If women ruled the world, would men and women be equal? Would men and women both raise children? Would the planet be protected? In other words, if the world was infused with a female perspective, which is about caring, nurturing, sharing, how would it affect the whole world? That's what that question introduces, a series of questions about how, women are excluded from most major political decisions on the planet.
I mean, in some countries, there are leaders.
Very few. Very few.
Like in the art in the past.
Very few.
Women.
And if you look at China, there are no women. If you look at Russia, there are no women except low level. There are way more countries that have no women, but having one or two women is not enough. Because what happens is, let's say there are 12 political figures who run the country, and there are two women.
Yeah, it's 10 against 2. You want 6 and 6.
Right, because otherwise this is what happens. One of the women says, I think we should do this. And then you hear all these men go, no, in a much louder voice.
Because men don't want to lose their power. And so your life has been a big fight, because once you decided that you were not a man, and you decided
I wasn't going to pretend
that you were a woman, it became more difficult, right?
It wasn't easy even when I was trying to fit in. I still faced tremendous obstacles. That's what made me decide to confront it and deal with it instead of trying to avoid it.
You basically are a fighter, right? I mean, you're not.
I learned from my father.
Only in your own life, you didn't just accept.
I didn't, that's right.
What did you learn from your father?
I learned that the world could be changed.
What was your father doing?
My father was a labor organizer, and he was a victim of McCarthy, and his life was destroyed by McCarthy.
But this is also anti-Semitism, because at the beginning, if I'm not wrong, your name was Cohen.
Yeah, but it had nothing to do with anti-Semitism.
It wasn't that.
No, he was a Marxist at a time of anti-communism in America.
Yeah, but many artists and many people who were
were Jewish,
cinema
yes.
and were...
No, it was There was a couple in Los Angeles. They were very important collectors and patrons who were
collecting your work.
Well, they were my patrons. And somebody actually asked them if I changed my name because I didn't want to be Jewish. And they laughed and they said, everybody knows Judy's Jewish.
No, you changed it. Why? Because it was your city.
No, I changed it because, you weren't in America in the 1970s, which was a very, very radical period of the civil rights movement, the farm workers, Stonewall, gay and lesbian, the feminist movement, and like the Black Panthers, they were always changing their names as an act of liberation. So when I wanted to announce that I was about to make an act of liberation from patriarchal values, I decided to change my name. It never crossed my mind that anybody was going to think it was a disguise being Jewish.
You fought it for many years, but then, let's say today, and since now many years, because your work, this is the first complete exhibition in Europe, but you had exhibitions all over the world, and this very exhibition has been in San Francisco.
Different, they were all different.
In New York, but they are all retrospectives, no?
Yeah, you have to understand how much work I've made.
A lot of work.
We have 8,000 works in our database, and that doesn't count everything. For example, Frida Kahlo made 200 paintings.
But Picasso made many also.
But it's very unusual for a woman artist. Very, very unusual.
But you also did so many different things.
Materials, right? Like Picasso.
Yeah, and we have an example here in Arles,
right,
of your different
techniques.
But what is also interesting is that the opening of your exhibition, there are two women bronze sculptures. And in the middle, there are many,
140 drawings.
Yeah, drawings. You did one each day.
It was called Autobiography of a Year.
But you were depressed at that time, That's what they explained me. So do you use this to come out of your...
That's a good insight. We had finished the Holocaust Project, Donald and I. We were in debt. We lost the house we were living in. It was a rental, and the woman wanted to sell it. We had no money, and I had no career. The dinner party was in storage. I had no opportunities as an artist, even though by then, people were studying the dinner party in classes all over the world. But, that's not a totally unusual situation for artists who have gotten into art history. We had a friend who was Man Ray's lawyer. He met Man Ray in the 90s, right, Donald? Man Ray, who, as we all know, was discussed as a very important artist of the 20th century, he was living in complete poverty. He had nothing. Well, that's what we had, nothing. And the only thing I had still was a burning desire to make art. Also, by then, even despite the difficulties I had in the art world, I was very famous because of the dinner party.
The dinner party, which is that triangular table with all these plates.
Yeah, the dinner party.
And each plate is a famous or less famous woman, right? Including Artemisia Gentileschi.
Right.
And this is now, just to explain, it's now at home in the Brooklyn Museum.
Which was my goal.
That's right.
To have it. But anyway, it had traveled around the world. I was very famous. And so what would happen to me, it still happens to me, but then it was... So I would be somewhere in public giving a lecture or something. And somebody would come up to me, a young person, shaking. I can't believe I'm meeting Judy Chicago. Well, that was a very different Judy Chicago than Donald and I having no money, So I wanted to do work about me, the real me, which is what I did.
And you did all these everyday drawings?
Well, I didn't do every day, but I did 140 days out of a year.
But there is your mood of the day, in each of these drawings, your feelings, what you felt. But this is a unique work now.
It's one work.
One work. And obviously they are also going through the exhibition at many different periods of your life. For instance, the 70s were a very active moment for you, no?
All my career, my whole life has been active.
No, but then you created, was it a community where there is a room where the picture of a villa or house?
A woman house.
Yes.
It was a work of art.
Yes. And this was another project.
But the thing about Woman House was probably the first feminist installation.
And you think that art, I know you said this many times, what is art? A feminist art is a vehicle to try to convince people?
No.
It has
political
influence?
No. See, I look at the history of art as the history of men's art. And so feminist art opens the way for a history of women's art.
So you're a pioneer.
I mean, Nikki de Saint-Phalle was a feminist artist.
Yeah, but there are a few. There's Kiki Smith, there is Tracy Hemming. I mean, there are several.
There's a lot now. There's thousands now around the world. Thousands.
But now you are going to revisit or to do it again, a project that you had done already called Smoke.
And I'm not doing it again. I've done 50 different pieces over the course of my career.
Atmosphere with colors, right?
What wasn't in the show yet. There's a screen in the room with the atmospheres, and it has a montage of all 50 of the pieces that I've done. And the LUMA piece is going to get added to that at the end.
And this is a new thing, the LUMA
absolutely new. It's site-specific. They relate specifically to the site where they're done.
Yeah, the desert, for instance.
The desert. There was one in front of a museum where I was trying to disappear the museum because they didn't show any women.
Before it was only landscape, then you put some women inside, no?
And we did show him the pictures like of Forever DeYoung or one of the big structures. More recently, we've done really huge pieces.
So what are you going to do in Arles?
I'm doing a piece that I designed specifically for Arles without knowing that this is the 150th anniversary of Impressionism, because my piece is an homage to Impressionism.
It's because of the colors?
It's because of the colors.
Because your work is also based on colors,
color,
no?
Right.
And each color has a meaning for you. Is it true?
Yes. There's a panel in Autobiography of a Year that equates different colors with different emotions. The other part of an homage to Arles is a series of lilies that are going to be in the pond that I designed. And the finale will be smoke coming from the lilies. Guess who that references?
To Van Gogh.
No, Monet.
Monet. The pond.
Yes, Monet.
Les Nymphéas.
Yes.
Yeah. I thought Iris.
Nobody really knows what I'm doing yet.
No, I understand. So you make an homage to Monet.
I'm making an homage to the Impressionists. We went to the Van Gogh Museum today and saw Starry Night, and the color where the smoke piece is going to start on the terraces, and then You know, the building that has all those, like, in front of there from the foliage is going to come different color. And then there'll be color and smoke coming from the pond, from the lilies. But the smoke at the top is blue, white, and yellow. That's
homage to Ukraine.
To Van Gogh. That's my homage to Starry Night.
To Van Gogh.
Van Gogh up there, Monet down here. And hopefully an impressionist feeling in the garden. We'll see if I achieve it.
There are very few women impressionists.
Oh, I know.
So,
all the more reason.
Yeah. Tell me something instead, because in this moment you also have Revelations, who is in London, no, at the Serpentine, and it will be also during the whole summer. What is interesting is I heard that this exhibition comes from a book, right? I mean, you had a book that you wrote in the 70s, you couldn't publish it, or because as you said, you didn't have the money or whatever.
No, nobody was interested in it.
And suddenly Hans Ulrich Obrist said, I publish it, right? And it was published by Hudson.
Thames and Hudson.
And because of the book, he created the exhibition. Well, coming from the book.
Yeah, that's interesting, Alain, because it's very unusual for an exhibition to come from the catalog. It's usually the catalog that comes from the exhibition.
That's right.
Right.
Instead, the exhibition is inspired by the catalog. Hans Ulrich insisted when he introduced it that he admired the fact that you are always handwriting.
Yes, and drawing.
That in a world of computers and all that, but you still...
Well, the show, the Serpentine show, actually goes from analog to digital. It goes the whole spectrum. Like when I was working on Revelations, on the Illuminations, Donald bought a tablet
so Judy could draw. What we did is we crossed over between Judy's drawing and photographing them and her adding color to it, and then her going in, and we didn't have time for her to spend hours and hours drawing on paper. We had to speed the process up. So I got her to learn how to draw with a digital pen. And we translated those into photographic things because I prepared all the digital files to go to print.
I mean, Donald and you work together a lot, no? I mean, you are...
Oh, yes, we work together a lot. Donald says, we've been married almost 39 years. And as Donald says, we met, we ignited, we got married, and we started working on the Holocaust Project all at once.
But is he having the same schedule of yours? I mean, I heard that you sleep very little, that you go to bed late and you wake up very early.
Not anymore.
And you are a great, great worker. Right?
Well, I am.
Well, we both are. We both are dedicated to work. I mean, we're workaholics, as they say, but we enjoy working. I mean, one of the things about I hate it when people say, oh, autobiography of a year you were depressed. It's, what people don't talk about is the struggle of being an artist and how difficult it is, and especially in this day and age where everything is defined by money. It's not, they don't talk about the struggle of dealing with ideas and bringing something to fruition and into, like...
That's right, because an artist cannot, I am a writer, and I can do interviews or work for a publisher or being a journalist or being a professor. For an artist, it's more difficult because you have to work all day long in the studio, and then at the end of the day, not many artists. I mean, there are amazing prices, and you are now among the very few. But there are many, many artists who cannot reach.
Yes, but women make only 47 cents on the dollar of men artists. So we're still struggling.
But is it a bit better now, no, with the success?
Not yet. No, it hasn't translated yet into money all that much. Hasn't yet. There's still a lot of collections I'm not in. A lot.
And maybe all these shows will be encouraging people to start collecting.
But money was never my goal. Meaning message is like a political slogan. Meaning is human meaning.
But nowadays, there are many people who understand your work, right? Or they support your work.
Particularly younger people, like the Serpentine, the press preview at the Serpentine, there were 200 journalists. I mean, that's like 5 times what they usually get. And some of the journalists were young, a lot of them were young. And the interviews I did with some of the young writers were at a whole different level than anything I had ever experienced. They understood my work and that's the same with younger curators. Vasilis, Hans Ulrich, he's not that young, Massimiliano, they understand my work at a whole other level than ever before. Okay, so what's the difference? Well, feminist theory, queer theory, masculinity studies, post-colonial studies, all of the new thinking. I don't know how much it's affected the French art world, but it's affected American curators, English curators, completely changed their thinking.
Plus, you are always very involved in the, let's call it, to simplify the climate change effects, in the world today. I mean, you were very aware of these problems.
Absolutely.
All the problematics, or whatever you want to call, that there are in your art are very much what the young people today
are concerned with. That's absolutely right.
And you sometimes lecture in universities?
Not anymore, but I used to. Somebody will come up to me in the supermarket and say, I heard you lecture in Iowa when I was going to school there like 100 years ago.
But you moved. I mean, you probably like the light also, no? Because you moved from California to New Mexico.
I like the light of California. The only reason I'm in New Mexico is because of him. I would have gone back to California when we finished.
And Donald likes to live in New Mexico?
I don't like to live in big cities.
But there is George O'Keeffe, who also lived in New Mexico.
And Agnes Martin. Donald was Agnes Martin's assistant for 7 years. There were a lot of artists in New Mexico.
There was also an Italian, Francesco Clemente.
Of course. I'm a big fan of his, actually.
And then there were some writers, and, I think...
there's a lot of...
Lawrence went to live
Bruce
there.
Nauman's was there.
Judy Chicago, besides all these big events around your work, and sometimes new things like the one you will show in Arles, the homage to Monet and Van Gogh. What are you doing at the moment?
Well, first of all, the smoke piece I'm doing, an homage to Arles. My smoke pieces normally take a year to plan. Maya wanted me to do a smoke piece in 3 months. Hoffman. In 3 months. Do you have any idea how much time that is taken to plan? We have to do color tests. I do drawings. We're going to look at the light again tonight. I'm working right now on this piece. The Revelation show, when Hans Ulrich announced he wanted to publish the manuscript. It's an illuminated manuscript. I spent 5 months working on it. I had to be in complete seclusion. Plus, I don't think people quite understand how much work it is for an artist to have 3 shows within 1 year, the New Museum, the Serpentine, and LUMA.
It's a lot of work.
So what am I doing? Too much.
No, but I'm asking you not what you did, because now it's going to end.
It's not over. I'm still doing the installation at
No,
LUMA.
but it's a question of weeks. So what are you going to do next year? In the future?
Go back in my studio.
And you have new ideas? Or
I have a project.
Project with new materials?
I have a project that I'm very superstitious. I never talk about what I'm doing until it's done. But I had a project I was working on before my life exploded. And I just want to go back and work on that by myself.
And have a quiet life.
I'm going to be 85 next month. I'm going to pull back from public life. I want to spend whatever time is left in my studio.
I'm not sure they will let you do that.
Don't I get to say no?
I'm sure there will be other shows going on, but to create a show is part of the creation, right?
Well, not for a long time it wasn't, because nobody was that interested in my work. So I didn't have to take any time out of my studio to work on a show.
But when it started to become interesting, I understand that it's very difficult for an artist to keep on talking about a landmark like the dinner party, no? I mean,
I got so bored with it.
It's like if Leonardo should talk all the time about Mona Lisa, or, you know, I mean,
Right.
Unfortunately or fortunately, you know, sometimes a writer is well known for one book and he wrote 55. People are like that. They like to have an icon. When you think of museums, you know, I don't know, the Egyptology Museum in Berlin, there is the Nefertiti, you know, which is a little sculpture.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why people go to see the museum. But then there are plenty of other things, right? I wrote a book with an artist called Michelangelo Pistoletto. He's
I know who that is.
He's famous for the mirror.
Yeah.
But he did plenty of other things.
Well, that's why I feel so grateful, because I used to go around saying, will I live long enough to see the body of my art come out from behind the shadow of the dinner party? And of course, because the dinner party doesn't travel, the retrospective at the de Young, the retrospective at the New Museum, the retrospective at LUMA, none of it had the dinner party. And when Vasilis and I were walking around the show, he said, look at all this other work.
You have a special relationship with Dior. Maria Grazia Curi, the stylist, also Olivier Elbos are fans of yours. You know, they loved you.
I love them
and
too.
you built in the Jardin Rodin in Paris a huge structure. When was it? In 2020. How Dior got interested in you? What happened?
Like a lot of things that happened in my career, it came out of the blue, out of the air, just out of the air. Apparently, there was a German magazine that was doing a profile on Maria Grazia, and they asked her about what artists had influenced her, because she'd already started, I guess, working with artists, what women artists. No, it wasn't even women. It wasn't all artists. 10 people who had influenced her. And she named me.
You are one of the 100 most influential women by Time magazine, right?
Yeah, okay, so
probably she knew that.
No, it turned out that she was a huge fan of the dinner party. And whenever she went to New York, she went to see the dinner party. So first, somebody interviewed me about her, and I didn't know very much about her and I didn't know very much about fashion. I dismissed fashion, actually. And then after that, they flew us to Paris in July of 2019 to meet Maria Grazia and Olivier and to discuss a collaboration. And I had designed in the 1970s an inflated goddess figure that was never realized.
Yeah, there is a picture in the LUMA show of it.
Yeah, and now I made those sculptures that are in the LUMA show.
That's right.
Okay, so usually, as I'm sure you know, the Dior couture shows are held in the Dior headquarters, but it was under renovation. And they asked us to go over to the Rodin Museum and look at the garden, because that's where the show was going to be. And I suggested, and then to make a proposal, I suggested making my goddess figure not as big as they made it, but everything Dior does is bigger than anybody imagines. Anyway, and putting it in the garden and then holding the couture show inside with the banners.
That's like an architecture in a way.
Yes.
Right?
It took 8 engineers to figure out how to do it. But what I learned from working with Dior, after that show, they sent us a press book and, all the writing about that show. It was 1,000 pages long. And I realized, my God, here is a way to get my art and my ideas. Like Dior, they sponsored the new museum show and they sponsored the Serpentine show. And they did interview walkthroughs of both exhibitions and posted on there. Do you know how many people have looked at those films? 1 million each. So that means 1 million people around the world are getting to see my work that would never see it otherwise. 1 million people got to see the questions in the banners. I'm on my 5th project with Dior.
They suggest?
Yes. This is what happens. We go out to dinner with Olivier, and before the dinner is over, somehow, without my realizing it, I've agreed to do another project.
Tell me a conclusion of this.
How about this? I admire what Maya Hoffman has done at LUMA enormously. In fact, I've been going around saying, I've known about her for a long time, but now that we're actually here, if I were doing the banners now, I would add another question. What if women ran museums?
There are many women who run museums.
No, not at the level of Maya. See, they're women and they're feminists.
The Tate Gallery.
Yes, Maria Balshaw. I know. Right. I knew Frances Morris very well.
For instance, or Rivoli Museum in Turin.
But some of them are changing museums and some of them are not. And Maya is creating a new model for what an art institution is. Diverse. Even if you look at the artists she has here, incredibly diverse. Women, men, artists of color, all different kinds of projects, artists in residence, exhibitions, programs. It's just a new vision. Like, we were at the Pompidou the other day, and it's like old-fashioned.
But do you think at the end of the day that your 6 decades of work in art is consistent passion you had, even in very difficult moments? I don't know if you were starving, but in any case, you had no money, no galleries.
I probably got the worst reviews of any artist except Yoko Ono.
So you're always in a good space, right? But you have a good start. But tell me, you think that things since you started, not entirely, but that there has been a positive evolution?
Oh, absolutely.
For women and for women.
Not just women, artists of color. Artists of color have also had a terrible time. And that's what I mean. Feminist art promotes diversity. I believe that every voice counts.
So now the market is much more open to the world.
The market and art have nothing to do with each other.
No, but I mean the art world. No, because now that we have Korea, we have Hong Kong,
yes.
Shanghai, we have
Japan. It's fantastic. Yes, there's been a change.
Yes.
That's the good news. The bad news is the market has come in. And when the market comes in, meaning goes out.
Alain Elkann interviews.